shocking love story. How husband turned into a killer, a dream marriage, a successful life, and a bright future until it all came crashing down in a way no one saw coming. This is the shocking story of Shelly Daniszewski, a woman whose love story turned into a chilling crime. How did a perfect life turn into a chilling mystery? The twists in this story will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because this is a story you won't want to miss. The crisp winter air of Manhattan hung over Christmas Day 2009 as Shelly Daniszewski wrapped up a cozy holiday celebration with her two beloved children. The twinkling lights and festive decorations still adorned her apartment as she began planning their New Year's Eve celebration, unaware that fate had other plans. On December 31st, in the upscale Dorchester Towers, a discovery would shatter the holiday season. Shelly's lifeless body was found in her bathtub, marking the end of what appeared to be a tragic accident. While investigators initially closed the case as an accidental death, something didn't add up. The circumstances surrounding the death of this vibrant, successful woman raised red flags for several detectives who couldn't shake their suspicions. Their instincts would prove right a decade later when the truth emerged. Shelly hadn't accidentally died. She had been murdered by someone who had once sworn to love and protect her. This dark tale begins in 1998, introducing us to 34-year-old Shelly Daniszewski, a woman whose presence lit up every room she entered. With her graceful demeanor and magnetic personality, Shelly had built a remarkable career in New York's competitive financial sector. Her journey from a marketing graduate to a highly sought-after financial advisor was a testament to her unwavering determination and sharp business acumen. In the fast-paced world of New York finance, Shelly had earned a reputation for efficiency and excellence. Her client list read like a who's who of high society, and her professional trajectory seemed boundless. Yet behind the successful career woman's facade lay a more personal yearning, the desire to find genuine love and companionship. Despite her professional achievements, Shelly felt the emptiness of returning to a quiet apartment each evening. As she approached her late 30s, she began to feel the gentle pressure of time, hoping to find someone who would not only share her life but understand her drive and ambition. Fate seemed to answer her prayers one February evening in 1998. At Le Bar Bat, a trendy establishment nestled in Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen, a Jewish singles event became the setting for what appeared to be a fairy tale beginning. There, amidst the ambient lighting and hopeful conversations, 25-year-old Roderick Kovlin caught Shelly's eye. The connection was electric, immediate, and overwhelming. So powerful was their instant chemistry that within hours of meeting Rod, Shelly made an impulsive decision that would alter the course of her life. She called her sister Eve with extraordinary news. She was heading to Las Vegas to marry a man she had just met. This whirlwind romance would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to that fateful New Year's Eve in 2009. What began as a story of spontaneous love would eventually unravel into a tragic tale of greed, deception, and murder. Though Eve's sisterly wisdom helped Shelly avoid an immediate Vegas wedding, the spark between her and Rod refused to dim. Their significant age gap, she at 34, he at 25, seemed inconsequential in the face of their growing affection. Within weeks of their chance meeting, engagement rings were exchanged and their families were introduced to what seemed like a perfect match. September 1998 painted a picture of joy as Rod Kovlin and Shelly Daniszewski exchanged vows surrounded by beaming faces of loved ones. Their happiness multiplied in 2000 with the arrival of their daughter Anna, adding a new dimension to their shared life. The early years of their marriage flowed like honey, sweet and smooth. Their shared Jewish faith became a cornerstone of their relationship, with Shelly's Orthodox upbringing guiding their active participation in their local Jewish community. However, as the initial glow of romance faded, cracks began to appear in their foundation. The commonalities that had seemed so abundant during their whirlwind courtship began to dissolve, revealing two very different people beneath. While Shelly continued to soar professionally, eventually claiming the prestigious title of Senior Vice President for Private Wealth Management at UBS, Rod's path took a markedly different direction. His brief attempt at a stockbroking career fizzled out, leading him to settle into a lifestyle funded by his wife's success. Shelly, ever supportive, invested in several of his business ventures, hoping to help him find his footing. But Rod's half-hearted efforts led to inevitable failures. The real turning point came when Rod discovered backgammon gambling. What started as a casual interest morphed into an all-consuming obsession. He began traversing the country for tournaments, spending countless hours practicing when home. But the game wasn't his only secret. Behind the screens of his devices, Rod was crafting a separate life, reaching out to women he met at tournaments. His digital footprint told a telling story. In one day alone, he contacted 40 different women on Facebook, most fellow backgammon enthusiasts. The man who had once swept Shelley off her feet at Le Barbat was disappearing into a world of game boards and online connections, leaving his family in the emotional wilderness. His behavior became increasingly erratic, punctuated by bursts of anger that left Shelley wondering if he was struggling with bipolar disorder. The contrast between the charming 25-year-old she'd met and the unstable man before her now was stark and heartbreaking. What Shelley didn't realize was that these changes in Rod weren't just signs of a failing marriage or mental health struggles. They were warning signs of something far more sinister brewing beneath the surface. The man who had once promised to love her was slowly transforming into someone who would ultimately betray her in the worst possible way. Tragedy struck deeper into Shelley's life when she became pregnant with twins, only to face devastating loss. One baby died in the womb, while the other's brief life ended moments after birth. Despite doctors' warnings that future pregnancies weren't possible, their desire for another child led them to modern medicine. In 2006, through an egg donor, they welcomed their son Miles into the world. A moment that should have brought pure joy, but would later become another weapon in Rod's arsenal of cruelty. Rod's toxicity reached new depths as he wielded Miles's origins as a psychological weapon, repeatedly reminding Shelley of their need for an egg donor. His cruelty peaked when he deliberately told their young son that Shelley wasn't his biological mother, a calculated act of emotional violence. By 2008, their decade-long marriage had crumbled into something unrecognizable from the romantic beginnings at Le Barbat. The final blow to their relationship came when Rod, showing complete disregard for Shelley's Orthodox Jewish beliefs, proposed an open marriage. Though Shelley immediately rejected this idea, Rod proceeded anyway, creating a profile on JDate under the alias James Early. His affairs became brazen, no longer hidden from his wife's knowledge. By January 2009, Shelley confided in her sister Eve, expressing fear for her and her children's safety amid Rod's escalating anger issues and infidelity. Seeking peace for her children's sake, Shelley made a bold move in April 2009. She leased an apartment across the hall, attempting to create healthy distance while maintaining Rod's connection with their children. But even this carefully thought-out arrangement couldn't survive Rod's controlling nature. Within a month, he forcibly moved his belongings back into Shelley's apartment, shattering her attempt at boundaries. By mid-May 2009, Shelley finally acknowledged the inevitable and filed for divorce. This legal step forced Rod back across the hall, and for a brief moment, life seemed to regain some normalcy. Shelley threw herself into her work and even began dating again, rediscovering the vibrant woman she'd once been. However, her renewed happiness and independence became Rod's trigger. Unable to control her directly anymore, he turned to more sinister methods. He transformed their shared hallway into a surveillance zone with hidden cameras and invaded her digital privacy by installing spyware on her computer. These weren't just acts of a jealous ex-husband, they were the calculated moves of someone watching, waiting, and planning something far more sinister. This period of Shelley's life illustrated a haunting reality many women face: the transition from emotional abuse to something potentially more dangerous. The surveillance equipment would later prove to be more than just tools of harassment. They were pieces of a darker puzzle that was slowly taking shape. Rod's campaign of destruction escalated as he tried to demolish Shelley's professional reputation. He launched false accusations to her employer, claiming she was abusing drugs and mishandling their joint account. The irony was stark. Bank records showed Shelley had withdrawn a mere $800, while Rod had helped himself to $7,200 since their separation. His scheme failed, though, as Shelley's boss already understood the volatile situation she was dealing with. July 8th, 2009 marked a disturbing new chapter. Using his access to Shelley's apartment, Rod took their children but failed to return them at the agreed-upon time of 8 p.m. As Shelley's calls and messages went unanswered, her maternal panic grew. What she didn't know was that Rod had taken their children to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, weaving a malicious web of false sexual abuse allegations against her. Both the medical staff and child services representatives saw through his deception, and the children were finally returned to their exhausted mother at 5:30 a.m. the next day. Undeterred by the hospital's dismissal of his claims, Rod pushed his fabricated story to the NYPD's Special Victims Unit. Once again, his lies crumbled under investigation. These false accusations backfired spectacularly. The family court judge restricted his visitation rights to supervised visits only and ordered him to pay $425 in child support. When Rod claimed poverty, the judge specifically banned him from spending money on his beloved backgammon gambling, a restriction that sent him into a rage. That rage eventually erupted into violence when Rod attacked Shelley, choking her and threatening her life. Terrified, she immediately secured a protection order. Despite everything, Rod had remained in Shelley's will, a final thread connecting their past life together. But on December 29, 2009, Shelley took steps to sever this last tie, instructing her estate attorney to remove Rod from her will entirely. The next evening, December 30th, showed glimpses of Shelley reclaiming her life. She arranged for a babysitter and went on a date with someone she'd met on JDate. Upon returning home, she spent precious moments playing with her children before tucking them into bed. At 10:13 p.m., she briefly logged into her JDate profile, a simple action that would later become a crucial timestamp in understanding what was about to unfold. What Shelley couldn't know was that these ordinary actions, changing her will, going on a date, checking her dating profile, were creating a perfect storm. Each step toward independence was pushing Rod closer to the edge. These would be among her final acts of reclaiming her life, though no one could have predicted the darkness that lay ahead in the next 24 hours. December 31st dawned with the innocence of any other morning when 9-year-old Anna went to wake her mother at 7 a.m. But this morning would forever change her young life. Finding her mother's bedroom empty, Anna pushed open the bathroom door, and her childhood shattered. There lay Shelley, face down in crimson-tinted water, motionless. A child's morning routine had become a nightmare as Anna, doing what children are taught to do in emergencies, called her father. Rod burst into the apartment, pulled Shelley from the tub, and initiated CPR while dialing 911. When police arrived, first responders were already on scene, directing them to the rear bathroom where tragedy had struck. Rod painted a picture of a simple accident. Shelley had slipped during an early morning shower, hitting her head on the tub. He pointed to a partially detached cabinet above the bathtub as evidence of her fall. The scene seemed to support his story, and investigators initially accepted this version of events. But Detective Rodermel couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Back at his office, reviewing the morning's events, pieces of the puzzle refused to fit. The position of Shelley's body didn't align with Rod's story about a simple slip and fall. The cabinet's damaged hinges told a different tale than the one Rod had shared. More disturbing details emerged under Rodermel's careful scrutiny. Shelley's body told its own story. Bruises and angry red scratch marks marred her face, lips, and right arm. These weren't the kinds of injuries typically seen in bathroom accidents. They spoke of something more violent, more deliberate. Then came the detail that made Rodermel's investigative instincts surge. Just the day before, Shelley had gotten a keratin treatment for her hair. Anyone familiar with this beauty treatment knows the cardinal rule: no water contact for 72 hours. Why would a woman who just spent money on her hair decide to shower when she explicitly couldn't wet it? But perhaps the most telling detail was what wasn't there. Rod had claimed to pull his ex-wife from bloodied water, yet his shirt remained pristinely clean as he recounted the morning's events to officers. This discrepancy would become one of many red flags that would transform this accident into something far more sinister. It was becoming clear that New Year's Eve 2009 wasn't going to mark just the end of a year. It would mark the beginning of a complex investigation into what really happened to Shelley Danishevsky. Detective Rodermel's instincts would prove crucial in unraveling the truth behind this seemingly simple accident. Detective Rodermel's hands were tied. Without an autopsy, he couldn't proceed with a full forensic investigation of the scene. Shelley's Orthodox Jewish family's religious beliefs prevented this crucial step, forcing the case to be officially closed. But, like a puzzle with missing pieces, the story of Shelley's death refused to fit into the neat box of accidental death. Those who knew Shelley best began speaking up, their memories challenging the official narrative. Eve, Shelley's sister, voiced a simple but crucial detail. Shelley despised baths, always opting for showers. Her friend Stephanie Goldman echoed this, emphasizing that Shelley never, ever took baths, not even quick ones. These seemingly minor details painted a picture that contradicted Rod's version of events. The turning point came when Lance Meyer, Shelley's estate attorney, revealed a chilling detail. Shelley had been scheduled to meet him the very day of her death to remove Rod from her will. The stakes became clear. Rod stood to gain $5.2 million as long as he remained in her will. This revelation transformed vague suspicions into serious concerns among family members. Desperate for answers, Shelley's family approached the authorities to reopen the case. Detectives Rhode Armel and Francis Brennan faced them with an impossible choice. Without an autopsy, their hands were tied. The case would remain closed unless the family agreed to this crucial investigative step. Caught between their religious beliefs and their search for truth, the family took an alternative route. They hired private investigator Michael Swain, whose fresh eyes brought new insights. In Shelley's bathroom, he discovered telling details that had been overlooked. The cabinet's hinges hadn't simply broken, they'd been deliberately damaged. Given Shelley's slight frame, she couldn't have exerted enough force to rip them off during a fall. Even more telling was what wasn't there. No bath towel in a bathroom where someone had supposedly planned to bathe. This absence spoke volumes, another piece in the growing puzzle of inconsistencies. Finally, 2 months after Shelley's death, her family made the difficult decision to set aside their religious considerations in pursuit of justice. On March 1st, 2010, the court granted an exhumation order and Shelley's body was sent for autopsy. This decision marked a turning point. The search for truth was about to reveal its darkest chapters. The investigation was no longer just about finding out how Shelley died. It was about exposing the web of lies that had been carefully spun around her death. As Shelley's body was prepared for examination, no one could predict the shocking revelations that would emerge from this final, crucial piece of evidence. The autopsy results shattered the accident theory. Shelley's hyoid bone was fractured, a telltale sign of strangulation. In April 2010, what had been labeled an accident was officially reclassified as homicide. Yet bureaucracy moved slowly. Investigators had to wait 2 more months just to obtain a search warrant for her apartment. The investigation began with Melissa Shields, one of the last people to see Shelley alive. Her testimony revealed something chilling. Hours before her death, Shelley had confided in Melissa about feeling watched, believing Rod was stalking her. This premonition of danger would prove tragically accurate. When investigators turned to Rod, they hit a wall of silence. But his digital footprint spoke volumes. Phone records and emails from December 30th, 2009 revealed his connection to Deborah Olays, a married mother of 3 from North Carolina and fellow backgammon player. Their affair had blossomed during tournaments, and Deborah had even visited New York to see him. The timeline of Shelley's final night began taking shape. Rod and Deborah played online backgammon until 1:03 a.m. At 4 a.m., Rod texted Deborah claiming he'd fallen asleep instead of working on his backgammon federation duties. Security cameras caught him leaving the building at 4:13 a.m., returning shortly after to give the doorman a Snickers bar, an oddly friendly gesture from someone known for being antisocial. The medical examiner placed Shelley's time of death between 1:25 a.m. and 4:25 a.m., precisely when Rod's communication with Deborah went dark. Though interviewed, Deborah painted only positive pictures of Rod, providing nothing that could link him to Shelley's murder. By 2011, the investigation had triggered a series of consequences. Rod was blocked from accessing Shelley's millions, and his children were placed with his parents amid a custody battle with their maternal uncle. But Rod's destructive behavior continued. He secretly drained $84,000 from his children's college fund, spending it on backgammon tournaments and trips with Deborah. This betrayal of his own children's future proved too much even for his parents. After violent confrontations over the stolen money, they expelled both Rod and Deborah from their home. The man who had once charmed Shelley at a singles event was now revealed as someone willing to sacrifice not only his wife's life, but also his children's future for his own desires. The investigation was building a portrait of a man whose life was spiraling out of control, driven by gambling addiction and desperate for money. But connecting these dots to prove murder would require more than circumstantial evidence. It would need something concrete to tie Rod to Shelley's death. Darkness had completely consumed Rod's soul by this point. His obsession with money and revenge transformed into a series of chilling murder plots against his own parents. Each plan was more disturbing than the last, beginning with the unthinkable idea of manipulating his young daughter Anna into becoming an unwitting accomplice by having her poison her grandparents' tea. When that scheme fell through, he devised an even more sinister plan, sneaking through the basement window under cover of darkness, murdering his parents, kidnapping his children, and erasing all evidence with fire. Deborah, his girlfriend and reluctant confidant, became the keeper of his darkest secrets. But even she had limits. As Rod's plans grew more twisted, she refused to participate, begging him to abandon these horrific thoughts. Meanwhile, the police were quietly building their case, piecing together the puzzle of Sheila's death. Growing desperate as the investigation closed in, Rod attempted one final deplorable act, trying to frame his own daughter Anna for her mother's murder. He crafted a false confession email, weaving a fictional tale about a mother-daughter argument over dating that ended in tragedy in the bathroom. By 2014, the relationship between Rod and Deborah had crumbled under the weight of his increasingly frightening behavior. Their eventual breakup proved to be Rod's undoing. Finally, free from his influence, Deborah approached the authorities with years of accumulated evidence, including damning information stored on Rod's electronic devices that pointed to his role in Sheila's murder. The police moved swiftly, arresting Rod on November 1st, 2015, just 2 months before he would have gained access to Sheila's $5.2 million estate. The trial, which began in 2019 at the Manhattan Supreme Court, revealed the full extent of Rod's calculated brutality. The prosecution painted a clear picture. Rod had always intended to eliminate Sheila. It was just a matter of timing. Though the evidence was circumstantial, prosecutors argued convincingly that Rod was the only person with both the motive and opportunity to commit the murder. Former girlfriend Patricia Swenson's testimony proved particularly devastating. She recalled a chilling moment during an August 2009 trip when Rod, consumed by rage, repeatedly expressed his desire to kill Sheila. As the 8-week trial progressed, the mountain of evidence against Rod grew insurmountable. Despite his defense team's efforts to maintain his innocence, the 12 jurors saw through the lies. Rod Kovlin was found guilty of murdering Sheila Danishevsky. On April 10, 2019, justice was finally served when the court sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison. Though Rod later appealed, his conviction stood firm. Today, he resides behind the imposing walls of Attica Correctional Facility in New York, where he has plenty of time to reflect on the devastating consequences of his greed and hatred. The tragic tale of Sheila Danishevsky serves as a stark reminder of how unchecked rage, greed, and manipulation can destroy not just one life, but entire families. Her children, the true victims in this tragedy, were left to piece together their lives without either parent, one taken by murder, the other by justice.